Good evening, Brian. It's not Thursday. This vlog is late. What happened was that Thursday I was at work late. It was the first night of sign language class, and so I stayed until it ended, so I didn't leave work until about 8:30 or 8:45 and didn't get home until late. And I decided that, in addition to the fact that I really didn't know what I wanted to talk about for my Thursday Top 5, meant that any vlog that I would record super late at the last minute without really having a fleshed out topic would be kind of crappy. And I figured it was better to post a good vlog late than it would be to post a crappy vlog on time. However, I meant to then post it the next day on Friday when I had more time, and then Friday got away from me, and then Saturday got away from me, and now it's Sunday. Sorry about that. However, here I am with a Thursday, Sunday top 5. And it's not really a top 5 so much as it is me talking about 5 things. There's nothing else in this category besides the 5 that I'm talking about. However, what I'm going to talk about today are the 5 books that I have finished and read so far this September. The first one I read in September is Roadwork. I feel like I've talked about this before in a vlog, but I'll go ahead and talk about it briefly just in case. This is a book that Stephen King initially wrote under the pseudonym Richard Bachman. It's pretty good, although definitely not one of his best works. It's not scary, or it's not a horror novel, but instead is more of a drama, thriller thing. But it's interesting. It's definitely worth reading for sure. It sort of has a different feel than normal Stephen King books. It's an early book of his, and so there are some problems with it. The protagonist is kind of hard to identify with. His motivations seem not really valid, and he's kind of annoying, and you have a hard time rooting for him, which I think is sometimes important. Not to say that you always have to have a narrator or protagonist that you're rooting for, but in this book it just makes it hard because I feel like you're supposed to be led to root for him and see his perspective of things, and you just don't as much. There are definitely some great things about this book. Stephen King is wonderful at writing setting and establishing a town and doing that world building, and it feels like you're there. His books, his stories, his settings, his people all seem more real than a lot of authors I've read, and that's still clear even in one of his earlier books, and one that has its own problems. I'm really excited to have read this one. I've had it for a long time, but I have not gotten around to reading it yet, and it's I think the first Bachman book that I have read of his, so that's very exciting as well. The next book I read is Scott Pilgrim. I'm also fairly certain I've talked about this in a vlog, probably around the time that I was organizing my bookshelf. However, the point being, this is fantastic. I know you've been getting into reading manga lately, and this is not really manga, I don't think, but it's sort of, but it's great. I loved the movie, and the book is just as funny and charming as the movie is. It's really fun, it's really light and goofy, and it definitely makes me nostalgic for being a teenager and then being, playing music with friends and sort of having that carefree life that you do in that book, or that he does in that book, and that you do when you're a teenager before you have more responsibilities. But it's just a great, fun, goofy read. This is the hardback version that they released a few years ago, which has been colored. So as the initial ones were all black and white, this one's been colorized. And that's really cool too. It makes it even more vibrant and fun to look at. So I would definitely recommend checking this out. It's a fun series. This is the first of 6. I haven't read the others, but I like this one a lot, and it's really pretty to look at. The next book I'm going to talk about is a collection of short stories. This is called Different Seasons. It is by Stephen King. You can sense a theme here. This one I'm also sure I've talked about briefly in the vlog or to you in person, but it is 4 novellas, some of which are very well known. There's The Shawshank Redemption and The Body, which became Stand By Me in here, as well as one other called Apt Pupil, which is also a movie, and then a smaller one called The Breeding Method, which has not become a movie yet, but I would really like to see. I really liked this. Stephen King definitely is just as good at short stories or novellas as he is at longer novels, and it's really interesting to see how he does things slightly differently when he has a little bit more of a restriction in the space. He doesn't have as long to build things, so things are a little more concise. The stories in here are really great, and again, proof that Stephen King doesn't just have to write scary stories. The Shawshank Redemption and The Body are really great dramas. One of the things that Stephen King is best at is capturing the feeling of being a child and coming into adulthood, and The Body does that wonderfully. I mean, it feels just like the actual experience of being a kid and having, free reign to do whatever you want, hanging out with your friends all day during the summer and palling around and doing all that. The Breeding Method is also actually a really surprise favorite of mine. It's really short. He, I think, wrote it sort of at the last minute specifically to put in this book because his publisher or editor wanted a 4th novel or a 4th story. So he wrote it really quickly, but I really like it. It's weird, it's quirky, it's got the most scariness out of all the ones in here, or thrillerness. And it's really great, and it's the shortest one in there, so it's also a really quick read. The next book I read is Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. I also feel like I've talked about this in a vlog recently. It's a sci-fi classic, and I'm finally getting around to reading it. It was really, really good, although also kind of weird. Apparently he's known for having sometimes his stories are a little bit meandering and that some things are ambiguous and unclear. I liked it a lot. There were definitely some great parts of it for sure. It's a really interesting world that he's built that could, in his story happens in the not too distant future that presumably could happen in the not too distant future in real life. And it's a little bit almost like it has almost like a dreamlike quality to it sometimes, where things just sort of happen and flow along, and you feel yourself being brought along on that journey without really taking a step back to think about, like, does this make sense for it to go from here to there? But it does when you're reading it. It's got that quality sort of like a dream in there. But it's really, really good. It's only, I think, less than 200 pages, so it's a pretty quick read as well. It was made into the movie Blade Runner, which I have not seen, and I'm probably going to watch it at some point soon now that I've read the book, so I'm excited for that. And then the last book I read is one of the other Bachman books he's written. This is an omnibus collection of 4 of the Bachman books, including Roadwork, that he's written. I didn't read this whole thing this month, but I read the first story in it, Rage. And this is actually an interesting story in that it is out of print. It is extremely hard to come by. They stopped making the omnibus collections with Rage in it. They also stopped printing it on its own a while ago. So it's not easy to find. However, I saw this in Ed McKay's a few weeks ago and had to snatch it up because I've been looking for it. So one of the reason that Rage has been pulled out of print is because it concerns sort of a school shooting scenario and a number of school shootings that actually happened in the late 70s and early 80s, I believe. The perpetrators were found to have either read the book and liked it, or had the book in their possession, or in other ways seemed to be inspired or interested in Rage. And so that, coupled with the fact that Stephen King has started to notice some pretty glaring problems and errors with it, decided to let it run out of print and not be reprinted in order to avoid it leading to any more copycat situations or crimes or school shootings being based off of that. And the book itself is not that great. Again, it's very early Stephen King, and it was started when he was in high school and finished when he was early in college. And you can just tell that he's really new at writing, and he has a lot of great ideas and a lot of talent, but doesn't really know how to control that talent yet or use it to express those ideas very well. The protagonist, again, is kind of a jerk, and it's impossible to identify with him. Well, not protagonist, but the main character. It seems like you're sort of supposed to think that the main character is a cool, rebellious figure, and that all of the other characters in the story end up falling in line behind him and really idolizing and respecting him, but he's just a jerk. And the entire time, the one character who is the voice of reason in the story is vilified, and he's the one person you're like, no, he's the only person doing the right thing. Everyone else is weird and following along with this guy through motivations that don't seem authentic or real. And there's just a lot of problems with that. Plus, it's not the best at character development with some of the other characters. The main character is developed pretty well. You can get an understanding for him. You don't agree with him like it feels like you're supposed to at times, but it's interesting. It was a very quick read. It's like 170 pages. And as a Stephen King fan, I'm glad I've read it because it is one of his books, but it's one of his more large looming works, if not one of his better ones. Given that some people said that they would lead them to do things similar in real life, and he had it pulled from print and all that. But it's not quality-wise the best. But it was still, a quick, enjoyable read, I guess, even though it had some problems. So there's that. Well, I think that wraps it up for this vlog, Brian. I'm sorry it's so long, and I'm sorry it's so late. Hopefully you found it interesting hearing my brief thoughts on these 5 books. So did any of these sound good, Brian? I know that you're not super into scary, but 3 of these all the Stephen King books I read this month weren't really scary stories. But Scott Pilgrim I think you really like a lot, and I don't know how much you're into sci-fi, but Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep might also be something you'd be into. I'd love to hear about it. I look forward to seeing your weekend vlog, hopefully later tonight. Again, I'm sorry this one's late. Have a good night, Brian.